Hello, my name is Asha Sampath. Welcome to this new edition of Business Africa, your magazine dedicated to the continent's business and economic news. As usual, you can win $150 in our Business Africa game. More details later, but first, today's top stories. Unlocking and supporting bank loans for African entrepreneurs is the new mission of development institutions.
In Africa, it's not easy getting a loan. And if you get one, you have to make sure your company can carry the debt.
Cassava is not only nutritious, coveted by the industry, it is increasingly appealing to African farmers.
Knowledge has been imparted into these farmers, and they know how to produce good cassava. And the most important thing is how now do we appreciate their effort by linking them to good markets.
Harmonize and better organize freight activities. Develop inter-African trade. Construction sites are buzzing for the development of the continent's maritime traffic.
We need to harmonize freight rates so that the importers and exporters can recoup their capital. But right now it just rolls on. We need actions, not words. African countries really have to align their freight rates.
Despite their growth potential, African SMEs today represent on average only 20% of the continent's wealth. The first cause of this stagnation, the obstacle to funding. Development institutions are well aware of the impact of this issue on employment, and they support financial intermediaries to help them lend to SMEs. A brief overview of the European Investment Bank strategy in Senegal and Burkina Faso in this report by our journalist David Thiombiano. Take a look.
Donc ici on est dans une salle d'hospitalisation.
Mrs. Nakulima and Dr. Diop decided to set up their own business in the health service sector. Their clinic is in a Dakar suburb. In just a few years, thanks to its competitive prices and quality service, Nest has made a name for itself.
I like my gynecologist. He's very pleasant. I can call him at any time of the day or night. I started coming here a year ago. I had a little girl 2 months ago. The service here is excellent for the price we pay.
Au prix proposé. Déjà, je suis assurée, donc j'aurais pu me permettre.
I have health insurance and could not have gone to a chic clinic somewhere, but I was more interested in value for money, and that's what I get here.
Ce que je recherchais, c'est ici que je l'ai trouvé.
At first, the plan was to set up a neighborhood maternity clinic. But demand was so high that the clinic became a fully fledged maternity and pediatric center. Women give birth here in the best possible conditions, with pre- and postnatal monitoring. The founders of the Dakar clinic say it is the first of many in a network that will spread to other towns in Senegal.
Nest a la particularité d'offrir sur le marché sénégalais en tout cas des tarifs concernant la
Nest provides a competitively priced service for the Senegalese market, thanks to a specific organization and patient care system.
Nous avons pu mettre en place. D'abord, la prise en charge elle est complète. En tout cas, certains médecins acceptent de diminuer ou de renoncer à une partie de leurs honoraires.
Our doctors work for reduced fees and our patients agree to share double rooms.
Confort en acceptant, par exemple, d'être hospitalisés en chambre double.
On est parti d'un constat, des femmes souvent qui sont enceintes et qui ne savent pas où accoucher.
We realized that expectant mothers didn't really know where to go to give birth.
De place dans les hôpitaux et les structures privées à Dakar.
Sometimes there just wasn't enough room in state hospitals with their lengthy waiting lists.
Qui reçoit beaucoup de monde, beaucoup de patientes.
And the private sector clinics were too expensive.
Qui est parfois beaucoup trop cher pour elles.
Faced with the reluctance of traditional bankers to lend them money for their project, the founders of Nest turned to the IP Fund, the European Investment Bank's public sector development fund. Thanks to a system of capital investment in companies seeking funds, an investor can become a shareholder. This solution enables small and medium-sized companies to access funding without taking on an excessive debt burden. Mamadou Traoré, owner of a transport company in Burkina Faso, sees the opportunity.
In Africa, it's not easy getting a loan. And if you get one, you have to make sure your company can carry the debt. That's why equity participation is an ideal solution for companies that want to expand without an imbalance between third-party funds and their own funds. By investing in equity, the investor takes a share of the company's risk. That's why it is more of a partnership than a lender-borrower relationship.
Thanks to an injection of IP funds amounting to a 48% stake, Baku Logistics tripled the number of vehicles in their fleet. The company supplies fuel to Ouagadougou Airport, as well as several mining companies, and transports cotton from the Sofitex factories to ports in neighboring countries. But Baku's founder doesn't want to stop there.
I would like to buy back the IP shares. There are several ways of doing that. I think the EIB is prepared to provide the support I need to buy back the IP participation in Baku Logistics equity.
The determination shown by the founder of Baku to regain his independence is in keeping with the development institution's desire to promote sustainable projects. And this is a vision he shares with his employees, all united around a common business culture and a desire to be competitive. One such employee, Omar Diarra, a truck driver, has been well rewarded for his performance for the company.
Now I have my own truck paid for by Baku in exchange for work. I was astonished after just 4 years as a driver to own my own truck. I wasn't expecting that at all.
The European Investment Bank is involved in numerous other projects in West Africa. A notable example was the reopening of the ferry service between Dakar and Ziguinchor. The line was suspended following the tragic capsizing of the Jula in 2002. Thanks to a €10 million loan, the service is now provided by the Aline Sitoé Diatta.
The South African pharmaceutical company BioVac is in negotiations with the global distribution system of the future vaccine against COVID-19, as well as other pharmaceutical companies. South Africa wants to limit to a minimum the purchases of vaccines abroad and produce them locally, while collaborating with Western manufacturers. South Africa currently buys 95% of its vaccines against tuberculosis and influenza from BioVac. The Made in Central Africa label is on its way. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, ECA, is examining the proposals for the concrete creation of this label. It will operate on the model of the proudly South African label initiated in 2001 and the Made in Rwanda initiative launched in 2015. The objective is a Made in Central Africa product entirely originating from the sub-region and manufactured in incorporating at least 40% of raw materials from Central Africa. The COVID-19 pandemic has propelled the production of ethanol from cassava, which is also used to make disinfectant gel. But even before this craze, more and more farmers had started to turn to this plant, cheaper and easier to grow than corn, for example. In Zambia, production exceeds 4 million tons per year, and women are more and more present in this sector. More details with this report by Aurélie Turc.
Easier to grow than corn, cassava has become the staple food for almost 1 billion people worldwide. Over 200 million Africans, more than 25% of the population, make their highly nutritious dishes from this root crop.
We make fritters.
More recently, the plant is increasingly sought after, for another reason by a booming industry, the production of ethanol, glucose, starch and flour. Yet despite growing demand and its production potential, cassava is still the poor relative. Cultivated for the most part by small farmers, cut off from mass markets and agro-industries. This is a paradoxical situation, and one that the 3ACP program aims to rectify.
In Cameroon, we have helped the cassava sector to update its strategy. We have then also contributed to develop and implement a package of intervention addressing mainly the transformation and commercialization of the product.
One example is this processing project, co-financed by the World Bank. Among other developments, the system makes it possible to partially replace corn flour used to make bread, which is imported, by cassava flour, which is significantly cheaper. This is one of the processing possibilities currently being evaluated by specialists from the World Bank. These new techniques will certainly give the produce greater added value and will in turn help boost earnings for many women, as Mrs. Manjung explains.
We refer to cassava as cocoa for women, as women do 90% of the cultivation. The 500 women in our cooperative are no longer as poor as they used to be. Their living conditions have improved considerably and will keep on improving because we're moving on to the next phase. If they cultivated 1 hectare before, they will now cultivate 3.
The local modification of the flash dryer, a dryer washer peeler, is the keystone of this pilot project and will help develop the area's engineering sector. The total cost of aiding the sector is estimated at around €600,000.
We have to make the move from an artisanal activity to a semi-industrial one. The flash dryer is a vital tool. Our aim is to set up a prototype. I'm working with someone from Nigeria, where production is more large-scale, to adapt the machine to suit our local production.
Specifically adapted for processing cassava, the flash dryer also makes it possible to recycle the remains of the plant for animal fodder once the starch has been extracted. In Zambia, cassava production jumped from over 800,000 to 4.7 million tons over a 10-year period. And there is more than the alimentary outcome at stake. Industrial exploitation of cassava is booming across the entire sub-region. The aim of the 3ACP program, in partnership with COMESA, is the professionalization of the sector and, in the long run, better economic integration in the regional market for all of the industry's players.
Farmers have changed the agronomic aspect, how to produce cassava. And they're using smaller amounts and ridges, and that has tremendously increased on the quantity of what is planted per hectare. Knowledge has been imparted into these farmers, and they know how to produce good cassava. And the most important thing is how now do we appreciate their effort by linking them to good markets.
Over 5,000 farmers and several producer associations situated in the central provinces and Luapala have benefited from targeted training. These courses are designed to improve their agricultural techniques and familiarity with the markets. The results have been surprising.
The importance of the training is really to improve the capacity of most of these organizations so that they're able to operate as viable and profitable business enterprises. The training focused on subjects ranging from enterprise development, formulating business plans, logistics management, contract negotiations and basically contracts, as well as marketing and group marketing.
Co-founder of an agricultural cooperative with 32 members, including 10 women, this cassava grower attended a comprehensive training course in agronomy and management.
We know what we have spent on production, and then what percentage can we put as a small profit. After we know all the costs, including transport, we have the packages. After these trainings, now we know exactly how to go about with our business.
By pooling profits derived from improved management of their respective plantations, the 32 associated cassava growers have been able to obtain funding to build offices for the cooperative and to purchase these 2 machines. Last year, they managed to produce 5 tons of top-quality cassava flour. As well as offering training in agricultural techniques and management, the 3ACP program and its educational aspects have led to a clear change of mentalities among the beneficiaries themselves, as well as a growing awareness of the issues at stake.
Ululine ulupia olutusanga mkulima kwa ndiuku elu alengo kutila kubi okutanunuko kufaya mlaiti okubika pano pa famu. Ululine lupia elu alengo kutila kubi okushiteji kayo pakutila tule bomba bwino muwika shibwesu. Nomba okulingana na maka yako bomba muri tuteine ulupia nalupelebela pantifi ntifi lefa eko kitafirifingi. Kutina akabi okwata trai cassava pantu amainsa nishi teti tukwate okupala tutenga tatukwete trai cassava iyo. Ngana tukwata ichakumikila kutute mu mayinsa insta yonse kwitwa kwatu kula kwata tute ukana putuka.
Donald Kalungushi now sells his cassava flour and starch to the Zambezi paper mills, unit packaging and wood processing, 3 of the main industries using cassava in the region.
You on Business Africa, welcome back to the second part of our show. African economies will experience a new respite. The G20 extended by 6 months until June 30th, 2021, the moratorium on the debt of the poorest countries affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. In April, the G20 countries had already committed to this suspension until the end of the year, but the World Bank, for its part, provides additional emergency funding of $25 billion to support the fight against COVID-19 in indebted states. Let me now get back more specifically to the problem of the private and bilateral debt of certain African states. After Zambia, it could be Zimbabwe's turn to be threatened by default. To talk about this delicate context, I'm glad to welcome Abebe Aemro Selassie, Director of the International Monetary Fund for Africa. Mr. Abebe, hello and thank you for joining me on Business Africa to discuss the continent's economic outlook. Last June, the IMF characterized the outlook for 2020 for sub-Saharan Africa as considerably worse than was anticipated in April and subject to much uncertainty. How does the latest regional economic outlook for SSA report analyze the situation?
The economy of sub-Saharan Africa is going to be contracting by 3% this year. Relative to June, this number is slightly better, but at minus 3% compared to minus 3.2 earlier. Really, you're looking at really more or less the same number. It's within the margin of error. So a very difficult year this year.
Tight external financing conditions and low commodities prices. What can sub-Saharan Africa do against this downturn?
So a combination of the two has been very difficult. Countries, by and large, have been doing the right policy response, allowing deficits to widen, financing this domestically, but also from resources like institutions like the IMF have been providing. The really key challenge that we see in the coming months is how to allow countries to sustain as supportive a fiscal position going into next year. So to avoid a premature withdrawal of the fiscal support that countries have been providing their economies this year. At the end of the day, the recovery is going to depend also as much on how deeply countries rethink and put in place the right policy frameworks to facilitate economic growth for the coming years. So even short of financing, there's still quite a lot of reforms that can be pursued to engender strong economic growth, to remove constraints on business activity. Those things will be important irrespective of availability of financing. So those also need to be advanced.
The IMF has advocated more international support, but the private sector seems to give signs of reluctance, as we're seeing with the request from Zambia to suspend debt service payment on Eurobonds. How do you analyze this development, and do you expect to see more of these calls for debt relief in Africa?
That's why kind of our initial push also was to see what the official sector, particularly bilateral creditors, could do as quickly as possible. Our call as early as March, April for that to be considered was taken up, and of course there is some relief coming from there. The private sector is going to be difficult, and debt restructurings always are a difficult issue. And I think it's going to take quite a bit of work to convince that it's in the interest of creditors, private and but also broader group of creditors, that's in the long-term interest to facilitate countries to have fiscal space this year, next year in the short term, so that they can recover and eventually be able to be in a position to repay their debt. So these are always going to be difficult conversations and will need to take place in the coming months.
Thank you, Abebe Aimro Selassie, for your time. The COVID-19 pandemic has not discouraged pirates in the Gulf of Guinea. Kidnappings increased by 40% in the first 9 months of the year, according to the International Maritime Bureau. The region now accounts for 95% of kidnappings in the world. 80 sailors have been attacked in recent months. The highly organized armed pirates from the Niger Delta no longer hesitate to attack oil platforms such as fishing boats or refrigerated cargo ships, sometimes very far from the coast. Yes, and this explosion of piracy in the west of the continent is bad news for African maritime traffic, which has quadrupled in 10 years. From Djibouti to Lagos via the major ports serving Central Africa such as Douala or Kribi, carriers and operators are working to make freight more fluid, and the issues are complex. Take a look.
Boosted by higher growth and its burgeoning middle class, Africa's international trade is booming. Maritime transport of goods has risen by a factor of 4 over the past decade. For the shippers transporting imported and exported goods, as for the warehouse owners and insurers, it is vital to compete on an even footing in a context of trade liberalization and international competition. One problem with trade facilitation is the resulting congestion levels in ports due to increased volumes of shipping to the continent. According to the World Bank, waiting time in the ports of West and Central Africa can account for up to 80% of total merchandise transit time.
We should review the problems facing shippers seeking customs clearance for their merchandise and cut the amount of time spent in the ports.
Another problem highlighted was the disparity in freight prices. Rates worldwide average 3%. In Africa, they are hovering around 12%. After unloading their cargo in African ports, the ships are almost empty when they leave. Worse still, according to the participants, the major shipping companies are not passing on the benefits of decreased rates to the shippers.
There may well be an opportunity for shippers' councils to join forces so they can negotiate directly with ship owners and benefit from the reduced freight rates.
Et bénéficier donc de réduction effective des taux de fret, mais aussi des ristournes de fidélité.
There is also the question of fidelity rebates that are usually paid to the carriers.
Aux transitaires organisateurs de transport.
Since the injunctions by the IMF and the World Bank concerning public sector restructuring in the 1980s, Africa has not had its own merchant navy, and all ports are operated as concessions. It is therefore in the interest of African shippers to join the transport chain further down for the time being.
Intra-African trade is not yet at a satisfactory level. Our nations are still geared up for imports. As you know, this is a major problem. What we need to do is to look at the specific specialties of the member nations of the Union of African Shippers Councils. Then we can develop sub-regional and regional trade in Africa.
Intra-African trade accounts for a mere 11% of the continent's trade. Stifling administrative and customs formalities for road transport are partly to blame. The situation is not helped by the fact that each state applies its own rules and regulations.
We need to harmonize freight rates so that the importers and exporters can recoup their capital. But right now it just rolls on. We need actions, not words. African countries really have to align their freight rates. Take the example of CEMAC, the Central African Economic and Monetary Community. The freight rates in Cameroon, Gabon, and Congo are not the same. In Congo, we have the highest of all.
To simplify the situation, the Republic of Congo has adopted the single window approach. Operators use an electronic platform to complete the various administrative procedures for the import or export of goods at every exit and entry point on the continent.
There are all too often false expenses. The number of people involved in the chain of command for clearance of merchandise increases constantly. This is clearly a problem. I'd say a solution is on the way thanks to the simplification of customs formalities and the use of the single window system.
The Republic of Congo is the 7th African country to have implemented this system in compliance with international standards to make international trade more secure. Another innovation is the use of the electronic docket to monitor shipments.
This docket makes it possible to track a shipment from the port of departure to the destination. We can also monitor transshipments. So that's 2 for the price of 1, as we have data updates and the export rate.
The database is also very useful in evaluating what needs to be done on a larger scale to facilitate exchanges. A geolocation system to monitor shipments will be used for the 2 transport corridors between Douala, Cameroon, and the landlocked countries of Chad and the Central African Republic. Considerable sums of money have already been invested to make African ports more competitive. One example is the construction of a dry port at Dolisi in Congo to help reduce congestion at Pointe-Noire and facilitate the transport of merchandise inland.
It's now time to reward our loyal viewers of Business Africa. It's up to you to answer to the following questions. If you're drawn among those who have given the correct answers, you will win $150. This is game number 536. So listen carefully to the 2 questions that follow and good luck. First question. In Zambia, the annual cassava production has reached 1.5 million tons, 4.7 million tons, or 5.3 million tons. Second question. What is the freight rate in Africa? 3%, 20%, or 12%? You know the answers. You can participate now by going to our Facebook page. Answer the questions, fill out your form, and good luck. And of course, don't forget to include your contact details, name, address, telephone, email, and the number of the game you are entering with the answers. Of course, this game, for example, is game number 536. The winner will receive $150 as our winner this week. Congratulations, you gave the correct answers to our game number 532. Here are the details. First question. How many Senegalese had access to drinking water in rural areas in 2004? Answer, 60%. Second question. What is the benchmark for the global metals market? Answer, the London Metal Exchange. Well, that's it. Business Africa is over for today. I'll see you next week, same time, same channel with Initiative Africa. We'll talk to the anthropologist Anne Grosfilet, specialist in African fabrics and particularly wax. In the meantime, you can catch this program on all our social media accounts. And feel free to share, like, and comment using the hashtag Business Africa TV Show. Take care of yourselves and have a great week. Goodbye.